Are you overwhelmed by IRS penalties? What if I told you there's a way to get them removed? Today, I'll show you exactly how to use IRS Form 843 to request penalty abatements and potentially save thousands. By the end of this video, you'll know how to fill out Form 843 step by step when you qualify for a penalty abatement and how to maximize your chances of getting those penalties reduced or eliminated. I've personally helped clients reduce hundreds of thousands of dollars in IRS penalties using Form 843, and today I'm breaking it down so you can do it yourself. I'm Brad Paladini, a tax attorney with 12 years of experience helping clients navigate complex IRS situations, including penalty abatements. But here's the thing, there's a common mistake people make when filling out Form 843 that can get their request denied. Stick around and I'll show you how to avoid it. The first thing you need to do is determine whether you qualify for a penalty abatement. Not everyone will qualify for a removal of penalties, but if you meet certain conditions, you could be eligible. You could qualify for a penalty abatement if one of two things are true. One, you can qualify for a first-time penalty abatement. This basically means for whatever year you're asking for forgiveness, the 3 prior years have no penalties incurred. So for instance, you are asking for a penalty abatement for 2023. If in 2022, 2021, and 2020, there are no failure to file or failure to pay penalties, the IRS will grant a first-time penalty abatement. Now, you don't even have to use Form 843, although you could. You could just call up the IRS and ask them for a first-time abatement. They will review your history, and if you qualify, they will grant the request. More commonly, you're going to need to establish reasonable cause. That is the standard the IRS uses to grant penalty abatements. Reasonable cause is a factual determination. So it's all about the facts and circumstances that led to you filing and paying your taxes late. You're going to have to demonstrate that you acted reasonably. In addition, the IRS is going to want to see current compliance, meaning that they are far less likely to grant a penalty abatement if you're missing tax returns or if you're not on a payment plan to repay the past due taxes. They want to see that you're going to make an effort to pay back at least the tax before they really want to entertain abating the penalties. All right, so let's walk through Form 843, claim for refund and request for abatement. This form was very recently updated in December of 2024, so it is brand spanking new. I think the last time they revised this form was back in 2011, so I guess it was due for a tweak. At the very top, there is a heading for tax. That would be if you're requesting an abatement of the tax. Pretty rare circumstance, not something that we're really talking about today. The next header is for penalty, right? So this is what we're going after. We are requesting a penalty abatement. The very first box says abatement or refund of a penalty or addition to tax due to reasonable cause or other reason allowed under law. That's the box that we're going to want to check if we are requesting a penalty abatement based on reasonable cause. And again, here we're really talking about the failure to file and the failure to pay penalties. There are other boxes below it for more niche areas of penalty abatements, but again, the purpose of this video is to kind of tackle the 2 most common ones, which is the failure to pay and the failure to file. You'll notice a box also for interest abatements. Pretty rare for the IRS to grant an interest abatement, but if the IRS does agree to remove the penalties for failure to file or failure to pay, any interest that accrued on those penalties will also be removed. So again, towards the top, if we're just doing a penalty abatement for failure to file, failure to pay, we have that 1 box to check. Below that, it's just general information. It's the name of the person requesting the abatement. And that is your name. Now, if you filed a joint return, you're also going to want your spouse's information there as well. Make sure you put your social security numbers and your address. The address should match what the IRS has on record. If it doesn't match, there's a good chance the processing will be delayed. Towards the bottom of the first page, it says enter the tax period or fee year. The very next sentence says prepare a separate Form 843 for each tax period. And this is one of those mistakes that I see all the time. Somebody files 5 or 6 years of returns late and they want to do a penalty abatement to have all the penalties on all of the years removed, and they file one Form 843 for all of the years. We have to follow directions, right? We need a separate Form 843 for each tax year involved. So if we're requesting an abatement for 2023, 2022, and 2021, we're gonna need 3 different Form 843s. So we put in the tax year, the beginning date, which would just usually be January 1st, and then the year, and then the ending date, December 31st of the same year. Box 2 is the amount to be refunded or abated. Not a huge deal if you don't know the exact amount, but you could go online, request your IRS account transcripts, total up what the failure to file and failure to pay penalties are, and put that amount down there. Box 3 is the date of payment if you're requesting a refund. So if you've already paid the penalties and you're trying to get the IRS to refund you the money, they're asking for the date that the payments were made. The reason for this is there is a statute of limitations on refund requests, and if you miss that statute of limitations, you're out of luck. So they want to see when the penalties were actually paid. Line 4 is talking about the type of tax or fee you're asking for an abatement. Again, in this example, we're talking about income tax, right? You filed your Form 1040 late. You are subject to the failure to file and or failure to pay penalties. And that's what we're looking at here. Line 5 is just the tax return. Again, in our example, we're talking Form 1040. The IRS also asks for, what specific Internal Revenue Code section that we're requesting the abatement under. Not a huge deal, but typically if you're doing the failure to file and the failure to pay penalties, you're going to want to look under 6651, and there's several different subdivisions that might apply, but 6651 is really where you're going to want to look. Line 7, they just want the generic reason why you're requesting the abatement. Again, in our example, it's going to be box C, reasonable cause or other reason allowed under the law. And then finally, line 8, there's a box where you can explain why you think there's reasonable cause. Typically what we do at our office is we just put please see attached, and then we have a letter drafted with all of the reasons that we think a particular taxpayer should be granted a penalty abatement. So what is really reasonable cause? What are some of the reasons that the IRS are looking for in order for them to grant the penalty abatement? Typically, the best reason that I personally have experienced in 12 plus years of doing this is the death or serious illness of the taxpayer or an immediate member of his or her family. Recently, we had a case where the individual, she was a very high income earner, typically made between $500,000 and $1 million a year of income. She had filed her returns late, paid the taxes late, and owed hundreds of thousands of dollars in failure to file and failure to pay penalties. She had a tremendous amount going on in her life. She had 2 very, very sick children who were in and out of the hospital. It required a lot of her time trying to get them admitted into special facilities. It caused her a lot of money for these private facilities who are trying to take good care of her children, all while trying to balance a career. And as soon as her children started to improve, she immediately dealt with her tax situation, filed the tax returns, paid what she could of the tax that was owed, and got on a payment plan for the rest. What the IRS is really looking for is whether you acted reasonably under the circumstances. So sometimes I have clients come to me and they're like, we're going over whether we think there's reasonable cause for a penalty abatement. And let's say they have, a lot of penalties for the 2022 tax year. And the guy's like, yeah, I had a heart attack in 2015. I'm like, okay, I'm sorry to hear that. How did that impact your inability to file and pay on time in 2022? And typically he says it didn't, had no bearing on it, right? And so the IRS wouldn't grant an abatement in that circumstance. What they are looking for is a timeline. Like around the time you were supposed to be filing and paying these taxes, what was going on? And it doesn't have to necessarily be the exact month, but we want to be able to show a timeline of how long this impacted you, and did you immediately try to correct it once things improved? The number one mistake I see with people trying to do penalty abatements themselves is they don't provide any supporting information. You can tell the best story in the world, you can write the best narrative on the planet. If you don't have anything to prove what you're saying is true, very unlikely the IRS is going to grant the request, because people do lie, they make up crazy stories, right? They want to see some substantiation that what happened actually happened. So in the case I was talking about earlier, we had hundreds of pages of medical documents showing all of the different diagnoses and treatment plans and when they were admitted, when they were released, and we laid it all out for the IRS, and they did in fact grant the penalty abatement, saved hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it was because we had this supporting documentation to prove what we were saying was true. Even if we submitted the same exact narrative but didn't include any supporting information, very unlikely the IRS would have granted that request. Okay, so you put in your narrative, you put in the supporting documentation. Please try to make it as simple and as straightforward as possible. The IRS is reviewing hundreds, if not thousands of these a day. And if they have to pick through a bunch of random documents to figure out what you're talking about, they're just not going to grant it. Make it easy for them, spoon feed it for them, and really make an effort to assemble the documentation in a way where someone can just thumb through it and it makes sense to them. At the very bottom of the Form 843, there is just a signature line. Make sure you sign it, make sure you date it. If you don't sign it and you don't date it, the IRS isn't even going to take a look at it. So make sure you do that. Last but certainly not least, when you send this off, send it via certified mail so you can track when it was received. Typically with penalty abatements, it takes the IRS between 3 and 12 months to review and get back to you. Now, within the first 3 or 4 months, you should at least get an acknowledgement letter saying, hey, we received some correspondence on your behalf. We need additional time to review and respond. But if you don't get that initial letter, there's a good chance it got lost, right? The IRS is a big bureaucracy and sometimes they do lose things. So mail it certified so you can prove that it was sent, especially if you're asking for a refund. And then follow up if you don't hear back in 4 or 5 months with some sort of confirmation letter that at least they received some correspondence on your behalf. If this video is helping you understand how to remove IRS penalties, please hit that like button so more people can find this valuable information. And if you need help removing IRS penalties or filing Form 843, click the link below for a free consultation. My team and I focus in helping people like you resolve their issues. And if you want to know more about tax strategies that can save you money, check out our next video where we're going to be talking about some options to reduce or eliminate back taxes. It's going to be packed with valuable tips to help you stay on top of your situation.